Welcome. Thank you for attending this webinar on digestion and immunity. My name is Nalini Ramji, and I'm really happy to be sharing this with you today. You have a chat window, and I wonder if you can just tell us how the audio and video is, if you're having any issues hearing or seeing. And that'll give us a sense. Good. Thank you. Thank you for that check-in. Great. Yes, video is blurred. Okay, we noticed that. We've checked on our end and we can't seem to do anything more. So please let us know as we keep going if there's an issue. Thank you. Thanks for that. Yeah, sometimes that's just the best you can do with technology. So my husband is moderating. He's going to be keeping an eye on the chats. Please continue to chat. Even when I'm looking at the slides and I'm not looking at the chat, he'll be monitoring it, and you'll do him a great favor by keeping him awake. Sometimes he falls asleep when I'm talking, especially about Ayurveda. Okay, well, lovely to see you. Thanks for those check-ins. It's a very interesting, different experience to be doing a webinar instead of a live presentation. So it takes some getting used to, but technology is really helping us now. Well, I'm sure more people are going to join, and so to allow them to just, come in without feeling late, I thought I'd start with a little story, and then we could go to the topic. So about 4 years ago, a little over 4 years ago, my mother passed away, and there was a lot, of course, as any death of a parent brings up. But one of the main things for me at that point, which is apropos to this topic, is that when I came back from settling the estate with my siblings and all sorts of things that we had to do, my life had completely changed, and I found it hard to get up in the morning. And I was technically healthy because, health in the Western context is, absence of disease, but I was just having trouble getting motivated. So at that point, it so happened a friend of mine who was deep into Ayurveda had, and I see some chats are coming in, but I'm not taking a look at them. I'm going to keep going and allow my husband to let me know if there's anything critical. At that point, I had to figure out what to do, how to jumpstart my life again. And a friend of mine had written a book on Ayurveda lifestyle wisdom. Up till then, I was madly in love with Ayurveda from childhood, but I only considered it as another sort of medical tool. If you're ill, take an Ayurvedic herb instead of Western medical herb. That's how I looked at it. It's another option for when you're ill. But at this point, I wasn't ill, but I needed to do something. So this book had come along right at the right time, and I just read it from cover to cover, and I started following it. I started understanding that there are these time cycles and there's this way of living that you can actually align with the Ayurvedic wisdom. So it's not about just waiting until your body just doesn't feel well, but that you can start to integrate this. And it really helped. I started following it, and I'd get up in the morning not knowing why, and then things would come along and life changed. And now it's 4 years later, and I'm actually following my dream to understand Ayurveda more. I am studying at Kerala Ayurveda Academy. I had a dream of studying Ayurveda from the ancient root texts, but I thought at that point I had to go to India and do that. And I didn't see that happening. I was happily married, settled here. It didn't seem like a possibility to suddenly up and go to India and study, but I didn't see another way of learning the Ayurveda I wanted to learn. And lo and behold, now Kerala Ayurveda Academy, based in Kerala, all my teachers are from Kerala, but their US operations are here in the Bay Area with a strong connection to the mother company in Kerala and all the Vaidyas that have started that process, the rich tradition. So here I am in California, still engaged in my current life, and yet following my dream. The only way I can put that together is to say that by following this innate wisdom and living up to it, it really helped me turn my life around, and I didn't know what else to do. So I just wanted to share that story a bit to explain also my deep love of this and my belief in it. Okay, looks like things are doing well. Just checking the chats. So at this point, I want to launch into the presentation. There's a lot to cover, and I want to make sure we end on time. Sometimes when I get talking about this stuff, I can keep going. And I'm going to stop periodically for questions, and then definitely at the end. So I'm going to share my screen. Just checking if the slides are visible. Not yet. Okay. Not yet. Give me 1 second. Let me try that again. Let me try that again. Slides visible. Okay, very good. Let me do that again. You can still see them? I've got my, okay, great. Okay, you can tell I've got my little cheat chat over here on the side. Okay, so what are we going to cover today and how are we going to do it? So I want to give you some background, the foundation. It'll help a lot because Ayurveda is a very subtle science. So we're going to look at the foundation. We're going to understand the Ayurvedic perspective of digestion, the time cycles, how problems arise, the concept of immunity, some diet and lifestyle, and simple practices that, my goal is for you to walk away with something today that makes sense to you. Okay, I'm back. Please chat with us that you're there. Okay, you can see me. Great. Video's back. Okay, so this can happen sometimes, and please bear with us. Yes, I'm going to bring the slides back up. I'm going to bring the slides back up. I was just informed that the sharing had stopped. So if we lose connection, usually I'm the one who loses connection and I need to reconnect. You should still be able to stay in the room. We're going to try again with the slides. I'm just stopping and waiting to see if they're being shared. Okay, it looks to me like you're able to see the slide. Slides up. Okay, thank you. Thank you. Okay, okay, I was given a tip to stop my video. Let's see if that helps. Let's see if that helps. Okay, are we good right now? Okay, okay. Just trying to remember what if there was anything I missed. I basically was just trying to say that it's not meant to be a prescriptive science, but it's meant to give you a deeper look at how nature works. So hopefully, as you understand more of of the principles, you can choose how to apply these in your life rather than think of it as a bunch of rules you have to follow, which is often what I hear from people. Oh, Ayurveda is just a bunch of rules. I don't want a bunch of rules. I'm going to proceed to the next slide and start to share with you about Ayurveda. Ayurveda comes from two words, Ayuhu Veda. Ayuhu means life, Veda is science. So it's a wisdom that comes from the Atharva Veda, over 5,000 years old. The Ayurvedic sages, actually deep in meditation and deep spiritual practices, were the ones who were able to articulate this and convey this in the Guru Parampara. And eventually this was written down. And this wisdom was collected and put together in what are called samhitas. So Charaka Samhita, Sushruta Samhita, Ashtanga Hridayam, these are some of the core root texts that have collected all this wisdom. It's based on the Sankhya philosophy, which talks about Purusha, Prakriti, and just think of that as analogous to the soul and the body. Purusha being pure consciousness and Prakriti is Mother Nature. Prakriti has three qualities, which are pure light, knowledge, clarity, and purity, which is sattva, action and dynamism, which is rajas, and ignorance and inertia, which is tamas. We'll talk a little bit more about those gunas in a bit, but this is just to say that Mother Nature has these qualities about her. And so when Purusha combines with Prakriti, analogous to the soul and the body, then you get something called creation. So let's go deeper into the foundation. We're all made of the Pancha Mahabhutas, which are the 5 elements. There's this concept of space. Space is that medium in which it makes room for all other elements. There's space in our bodies. Our ears hear because of sound, which is from the space element. When space vibrates, it becomes air. When that air has friction, it becomes fire. And so we have a digestive fire within us. When that fire condenses, it becomes water. And when the water dries, it becomes earth. So basically, we just want to realize that we and Mother Nature are made of the same components, the same building blocks. And those building blocks are constantly, it's dynamic rather than static, even though we look at the body and think of it as a static structure. It's actually dynamic. Everything is changing. One day it's sunny, one day it's cloudy. So in the environment, the elements have changed. In the same way in our bodies, the composition of the elements change. We're not the same person from day to day. So let's take a little bit closer look at these 5 elements and correlate them to what we're already familiar with. If we think about space and air and how they come together, that's the concept of energy. Then we need a principle of transformation. And finally, water and earth become matter. And we'll see as we go along that we're actually looking at the body level at the matter through conversion turning into energy. And so creation is simply a process of transformation from one state to another, which completely correlates to the laws of thermodynamics. There's no loss of energy in the universe. It's simply a matter of transformation from one to the other. So let's look at these 5 elements and how they combine. If you've ever encountered Ayurveda, you've heard the word dosha. Well, what are the doshas? But when these elements come together in certain configurations, then they become the forces that are responsible for the functioning of the body. So if we look at space and air, those 2 elements that we looked at earlier as energy, they become vata dosha, which is responsible for movement. Movement is actually an understatement for what vata dosha does. It's responsible for regulation and anything that is like the blinking of your eyelids, the beating of the heart. There's just so much it does. Pitta dosha is responsible for transformation. Now it makes sense that fire, we talked about that earlier, that fire is responsible for transformation. So what is the water doing there? Actually, Pitta includes a little bit of water. For those of us who live in California, we're very familiar with the fact that fire can be destructive. And so when fire burns out of control, then it actually is not helpful. It doesn't just do its transformation, it actually is destructive. But that little bit of water is there to keep it under control. And Kapha dosha is structure and stability. So you can see that Kapha dosha is more of the matter. It correlates to matter. And Vata dosha correlates to energy. And Pitta dosha is that transformative principle. Similarly, in the universe, we can see wind, sun, and moon as forces that are responsible for the functioning of the universe. The sun is so far away, but when the sun is active, we become active and we function. The flowers blossom and the fruit ripens and the universe functions beautifully. It doesn't require the sun to physically come and touch anything. Its mere presence does it all. Similarly, the moon, that's when the dew comes and things grow and you get more of that wet, cold nature. And the wind that creates movement and dynamism. So what our goal is for these 3 doshas to be in optimum balance. And you'll see the idea coming through as we go forward, that that balance is unique for each of us. So although we're made of the same building blocks, we're also unique. Now let's bring that back to the idea of the 3 gunas or qualities, the sattva, rajas, tamas that we looked at earlier. So these 5 elements are not just physical and don't just correlate to what we think of as space, air, fire, water, and earth, but they're also subtle. So space is completely clear and pure. Fire can purify, and water can cleanse. And when you put the 2 together, fire and water, you get hot water. That's often what we use to clean. So they have cleansing attributes. The sattva is that quality that allows us to take the right course of action, to make healthy, good decisions in our lives. Fire also has the ability to burn out of control, as I mentioned earlier. And so when it's fanned by air, it becomes rajas, which is that quality of dynamism, movement. Now, rajas can be healthy or unhealthy. And when it's healthy, it enables us to take action. And tamas, when that water and earth come together. Now, water is not only cleansing, but water can become stagnant and cloudy. And so when you combine earth and water, you'll see that that water is cloudy, stagnant. It's not, you can't see your face in it clearly. So it's more sluggish. It contributes more to inertia. However, it can be a healthy quality. It can enable us to walk away from something that okay. Looks like we have network issues today. I apologize. I'm going to try again. Okay, good. Good, good, good. Thank you guys for keeping the chats going and letting us know how things are going. It varies, just like the 5 elements, it varies day by day how our network connection is. Going to try that again. Okay, I'm going to share and turn off the video. That's the tip I'm getting. No. Okay. I'm going to try this again. Okay. I think they're coming up. Just waiting to see if you can see the slides or not. Mm-hmm. Not getting feedback yet. How is that? Nothing yet. White screen, blinking dots. Okay, you guys are so helpful. Thank you. Thank you, thank you. Let's try that again. Okay, I think something's coming through. Back. Yes, okay, looks like it's back. Very good. So that's the three gunas. I think I've gotten this far already. And tamas. Yay, okay. So when Rajas and Tamas are directed by Sattva, they contribute to a healthy state of mind. I think we've covered that. And so all I want to show here is that yoga and Ayurveda are sister sciences. Ayurveda starts from the body and affects the mind. You'll find the herbs and formulations in Ayurveda also have a mental component. And hopefully you've seen now, because the 5 elements are part of both the body and the mind, you can see why they work together. And so they are not separated. Whereas yoga, which again, is not referring to asanas, but referring more to the practices like meditation and the idea of union with God. Yoga starts from the mind and goes to the body. So when they come together, they're wonderfully complementary. And so let's look at how these connect. So Vata dosha is space and air, that principle of energy. Pitta dosha, fire and water. Kapha dosha, water and earth. So you can see as Kapha dosha increases, your tamas will increase. So when it's good for it to increase. We want Kapha dosha, it's our structure and stability, but is it getting too much? We always have to be mindful of that. How much do we want? Now look at the interesting thing about Rajas. Rajas and Vata and Pitta go together. So we'll see as we get too dynamic, our dynamism increases beyond a healthy state. That correlates to increased Vata and Pitta doshas. But very interesting is to see that Sattva dosha means all 3 doshas are in a healthy balance. And so our goal is to keep the doshas in an optimum balance. So now this comes and correlates with the idea of body types. And this is one of the beauties of Ayurveda, that it says none of us are all the same. We are unique. These are going to be caricatures as we describe them, but ultimately we're a combination of these. So let's look at that. A classic Vata Prakriti person is going to be very creative and yet probably very indecisive. You can see that the qualities, the elements of space and air coming together are going to create someone who's more on the move, but going to find it very hard to just ground and stabilize. The Pitta dosha person is going to be a natural leader and yet perhaps judgmental and controlling because they want things done a certain way. That's the way they see things done. Your Kapha dosha person is going to be very nurturing and family oriented, but going to have trouble getting going because those qualities, those elements of water and earth are going to be more sluggish and more solid. Now you can see that each of these has positive and negative qualities. Most of us are a combination of 2 doshas. And so this provides the individual component to Ayurveda, that even though we're composed of the same elements, we are unique. Now, something very important I want to bring up on this topic of Prakriti. A lot of people learn about Prakriti and then think that Prakriti should be cured. It's not something to be cured. This is just how it's, as one of my teachers would say, it's our operating system. If you're a Kapha person, you're more likely to have a little extra weight. Now you can balance that to a degree, but you don't need to look like the Vata person. You come with probably extra immunity and you come with certain qualities that are advantageous. So you want to keep your Prakriti in balance, but it's not a disease. Prakriti is not a disease. And that's been a common myth or, misperception about this concept of Prakriti. So this is more, we want to understand who we naturally are, how we naturally function, what makes us the best we are. Every one of these dosha characteristics has its positive side. So we want to keep that in balance. When we get to the idea of illness, that's called Vikriti. So the person who's got a certain Prakriti, so let's take a Vata dosha person, is more likely to have a Vata imbalance down the road because they've got extra Vata. But when we look at that, we would need to bring back the extra vata, but not curb the vata that's already existing. So when we look at the concept of health in Ayurveda, this is all about being established in oneself. The word swastaha, swa meaning self, and staha being established in. So being established in yourself. That means I don't need to look like the person next door, and I don't need to look like the image on the billboard. I need to be the best me I can be. So you can see again how this correlates with the idea of a spiritual practice. The deeper we go within and become more our true self, the more healthy we are as well. So you can see this shloka here from Sushruta Samhita talks about a person is healthy if their doshas are good, their Agni and their Dhatus, I'll be discussing those terms a little later, is in balance in accordance with our Prakriti, with our body constitution. Our malas or our wastes are eliminated regularly, our thinking is clear, our mind is sattvic, our indriyas or senses are sharp, and we're peaceful, happy, and cheerful. So you see how many subtle components there are. And at this point, I should mention that one of the things that's interesting about Ayurveda is its focus on function rather than structure. So all these things, there are very few of these things that can be seen under a microscope, but they all matter. And so, for example, the word for tongue as an organ to taste is rasana. That means the organ that tastes. So a couple of days ago in one of our classes, one of my teachers said, if tomorrow the hand becomes the organ that tastes, then the hand will be called rasana. So the name of the organ relates to its function. So we're constantly focused on what is that thing doing? What is its function, rather than what does it look like? So here we're looking at how do we align? And so when we go through our internships and we're learning to do consultations, when we're interacting with someone who's new to Ayurveda, this is how one of my teachers will always start by explaining that really all of the healing systems are within us. Our digestion, our respiration, our heart, everything is within us. So the person who's coming for help, he's the person who has all the healing systems within him. So when we understand our core nature, where our weak tendencies lie, our weak tendencies could be inherited, but they could also be based on our prakriti, our body constitution, or they could be, there are many factors, but there's some probable area that's going to be our weak area, or several weak areas, or it can vary depending on season. And there's a lot of fluidity to that, but usually we have some area. My bones might be the weaker one in me, and it might be the blood in another person. So how can we align with health rather than disease? That ability to align and to realign is primarily in our choices of diet and lifestyle. And the Ayurvedic sages also have rigorously documented the properties of herbs and spices and their healing abilities. So once we understand how to incorporate those, we have a way to realign. So this is how my teacher would tell a person who's coming for a consultation. The role of the Vaidya or the Ayurvedic doctor or practitioner is to help you see that you're the one with all the healing systems within you, and nature, Mother Nature is there, and it's simply a matter of connecting the two correctly. And the Vaidya is simply there to show that way. And so therefore you're doing the work. So at this point, let me just stop and see if anyone has any comments or questions on this first section before I move forward. And I'm not going to stop the slides. I'm just going to wait to let my husband tell me if there's anything I should. Okay, so it looks like I can keep going. Great. Okay, excellent. So we're going to move on to the Ayurvedic perspective of digestion. So in Ayurveda, we talk about 6 tastes. And ideally, every day and in each meal, you should consume all 6 tastes in a suitable proportion, with an emphasis on sweet taste, which is grains and not candies. That's very important. We always have to clarify that sweet doesn't mean pastries. So on the right, you can see the elements, water and earth, compose the sweet taste. And those were the properties of kapha dosha. So we want some good, healthy kapha dosha in us. The sweet taste contributes to growth, strength, healthy skin and hair. I've just listed a few examples. There's so many more. In excess, it can lead to obesity, to diabetes, to indigestion, and to congestion. And so examples of the sweet taste are grains, sweet fruits, starchy vegetables, what we call carbohydrates, dairy products, and the meats. Then the next taste is the sour taste, composed of earth and fire. This energizes our body, it stimulates our appetite, and enhances attention. They all have mental components as well. In excess, it'll lead to burning sensation, to giddiness, premature aging, and loose tissues. And examples of the sour taste would be citrus fruits, tomato, vinegar, alcohol, pickles, cheese, and yogurt. So the salty taste is composed of fire and water. It helps our digestion, it helps us maintain our electrolyte balance, and it helps us with our elimination. It's laxative. In excess, it causes inflammation, edema, skin disease, early baldness, even premature graying. And so what contains salters? Salts, seaweeds, soy sauce, fish, mineral salts, and celery. Then the pungent taste is fire and air. So that helps with digestion and absorption. It reduces congestion and it cures, it's antiparasitic. So if we have parasites, then that's a good taste to use. In excess, it causes pain, dizziness, dryness of mouth, tremors, and burning sensations. And examples of the pungent taste are black pepper, chili pepper, garlic, ginger, radish, onion. Then there's the bitter taste. Bitter taste, which has air and space. Helps eliminate toxins. It's anti-inflammatory, laxative, liver, and a digestive tonic. You know, the bitter taste is not much favored in the American cuisine, so it's sorely missed. It definitely has its place. In excess, it can create numbness, emaciation, sharp pain, headache, stiffness, and tremors. And examples are leafy vegetables, neem, cauliflower, asparagus, aloe vera, and bitter melon. Bitter melon is well known to those who are Indian. And the astringent taste. The astringent taste is composed of air and earth. It stops bleeding, it's antidiuretic, it's antibacterial. In excess, it can cause tremors, constipation, dryness, distension, thirst, and emaciation. And examples would be chickpeas, green beans, blueberries, turmeric, beans, and lentils. And so this is the idea of rasa. Rasa is the taste or sensation that the tongue experiences as soon as it comes into contact with food. And there's a much deeper, in any of these slides that I show you, I could probably give a talk for an hour on each one, because there's a very deep thought process in Ayurveda about what happens after the taste. But if we focus for now just on the taste, and if you look at the elements on the right, just take a look at the fact that the top 3 have the water and earth elements. The bottom 3 have the air element. So the top 3 are going to create more moisture in the body, and the bottom 3 are going to create more dryness in the body. Then the second, third, and fourth have the fire element, so they're going to create more heat. So we're going to start seeing how these tastes come together and how we can use them artistically. So that we're going to go to that next. So the taste, or the rasa, has an effect on the doshas. So let's look at first the sweet taste. On the left, we can see that the sweet taste will pacify or reduce pitta and vata. So let's think about that. Sweet taste is composed of water and earth elements. So naturally, water and earth is going to ground the hot fire and the air. But on the right side, we can see that it's exactly like kapha dosha, so it's going to increase it. So when we think about which of our doshas may be out of balance, we can see now which taste we might want to use to help adjust that. Let's move on to the sour taste. The sour taste has the fire and earth elements. So that's naturally going to ground the air, spacey vata. But because it has both fire and earth, it's going to increase the pitta and kapha doshas. And salty taste, for similar reasons, because it's fire and water, is going to do the same. It's going to be helpful for vata dosha, but bad in the sense when I say the word bad, I only mean it's increasing. So one of the things that we want to be very careful of and is not to say anyone is good or anyone is bad, because all of them were created by nature for a reason. And so we can all use them all in the right way. And so we look at the pungent taste. Pungent is perfect to reduce kapha dosha because kapha is that water and earth. So you have that fire and air that is going to lighten the water and the earth. But that's naturally going to spark the fire and the air of pitta and vata doshas. Now the bitter taste. The bitter taste is composed of air and space. So it's going to be very purifying for the heat and the kapha dosha, which has that solidity to it. But that's going to make the vata dosha more spacey. And very similar about the astringent taste, because astringent taste has the air and earth. So it's drying, even though it has the earth in it. When you combine air and earth, as you know, if you take earth and then you make it more dry, it's going to be very dry. It's going to create more dryness. So dryness is going to be increasing vata dosha. So we're going to now continue and look at how the digestive process works and how the doshas are created. So when you first eat something, the first phase is where kapha dosha is created. And we all know that when we eat something, usually we feel heavy and sometimes we get a little bit of mucus in the first part of digestion. That first part of digestion takes about 1.5 to 2 hours. And then as we move into the second phase, pitta dosha is created as the food morsel gets to the duodenum, and this is where it's digested. And this phase takes about 2 to 3 hours. During the third phase, we're now in the drying, absorbing phase. So this is where vata dosha is created. All these three doshas, this is also a good example of how all the three doshas work together to manage the functions of the body. In this one example, you can see how they work together, and they do this everywhere. So in this example, vata dosha is helping to move the food down into the stomach. Then it's getting liquefied using kapha dosha, and pitta dosha is helping with the digestion. So in this way, throughout the body, the doshas are working together. And therefore, a healthy digestion is key to balancing the doshas. So one thing that's very important here is that if you come for a consultation because you have, let's say, hip pain, it doesn't matter what you have, but let's just use that as an example. During the consultation, the Ayurvedic practitioner is going to be asking you a lot of questions about your appetite and your digestion. And you might be wondering why. Why does this have to do with my hip pain? But if you think about if I needed to get help from somebody, if I needed to go see a doctor and the roads were blocked and I couldn't reach them, I couldn't get help. Well, the only roads inside the body for the 5 elements that are in the Mother Nature to be inside your body is through your digestion. And so even medicine can't reach the parts it needs to reach if it can't get through the system. So we're always going to be focusing on digestion no matter what your complaint is. We're always going to be focusing on digestion. Can we get through? Even if we gave you some herbs, would you be able to digest them? If you can't, we need to start there. We need to clear the roadblocks, get everything working, get this flow going, and very often that process itself clears some of the problem, because the resources that you may be taking in through your food or supplements aren't able to reach that area, and so nothing is getting through. So now this slide is going to look a little technical and intense, but I'm going to try to make it simpler. This is where I want to bring in the concept of immunity. So now in the previous slide, we saw that there's this digestion, the concept of digestion, and everything has to get through the system. So what's it going to do now is it's going to go through to all the rest of the systems, and all the systems work together. So once the food is digested, it becomes what's called rasadhatu. The closest correlation is plasma. And every system, every tissue system that's formed is going to help create the next system. It's going to help nourish the next system, and it's going to contribute to our internal immunity, which we call ojas. And so this is what I'm trying to get through this slide. So bear with all the Sanskrit and the technical aspects of it, and just focus more on the fact that we're creating an interconnected system that works together, rather than separate organs that have nothing to do with each other. So once that nutritive essence is created, it's going to nourish all the system, and the next system it's going to nourish is the blood system. And so the blood, if we create healthy blood, so remember, we want to create a healthy tissue system as we go along for each one. And just like I talked about earlier with the road blockage, somewhere down the road, this can get blocked. But if this is working well, then each one is going to contribute to the next system and contribute to our immunity. And so now you can see that functioning here. From the blood, we create the muscle. From the muscle, we create fat. And this muscle and fat work very well together, because the muscle will store the excess reserves in the fat and retrieve them from the fat when it needs it. From the fat, we create healthy bone. From the bone, we create healthy bone marrow and nervous system. And from there, we get to our reproductive system. Now, the reproductive system is the last in the chain, and so it doesn't need to nourish another system, and so therefore all of its essence goes into our immunity. So if we are able to create a fully functioning system where everything is moving through, then our immunity becomes very strong. I also am showing here that each of these has an Agni. So when we use the word Agni, it's not just the digestive fire, but we're also talking about the hormones and enzymes and all the transformers. Because remember, Agni and Pitta are responsible for transformations. There are many transformative principles within the body. Hormones and enzymes, catalysts, anything like that. So we want all of these Agnis to be functioning well. So this is the correlation to immunity, how we can improve our overall immunity. So now we're going to focus on Agni, because obviously Agni is very important. All these Agnis are very important. So how do we know if our Agni is doing well? Good question. Are you hungry for each meal? Can you digest well when you eat the right quantity at regular intervals? Then your 3 doshas are balanced and your Agni is balanced. If you have a little extra Vata dosha, then it can create an erratic Agni. So you can see here, the example is my hunger comes and goes. It's erratic. I can lose my appetite quickly. Just imagine a wind is kind of blowing out that fire. So sometimes the fire burns well, and sometimes it's just low. So a recommendation we would make is to regularize your digestion by eating at certain times, because a person who's got erratic appetite is more likely to eat at erratic times and further the problem. Or is it burning too brightly? You've got too much Pitta dosha that's influencing your Agni. You get ravenously hungry to the point you can't wait for food. So now we're going to suggest that you eat some of the heavier foods, don't skip meals, and have a larger portion. So feed that Agni at the right time, still keep regular times, and don't overeat and make it sluggish. And now imagine if you've got too weak a fire. Your Kapha dosha is influencing your Agni and it's getting low. So that means that after a meal you feel low, dull, and sluggish. So then we're going to suggest that you eat light, digestible, warming foods, and make sure that you don't overeat, especially at dinner. And so actually 90% of disease occurs due to weak Agni. So now we can see where the breakdown is happening even earlier in the system, and it's only later that we recognize it as a disease. So now the next step is to understand this concept, a very interesting concept that in Ayurveda called ama. So imagine you've got an apple here, and on the left I have a good Agni, Sama Agni, and on the right I've got that Manda Agni or the weak Agni. So when the apple is digested by the good Agni, it turns into something that is nutritive for the body, that the body can recognize. So when Agni is strong, food is digested well, it becomes a nutrient the body can use, and this process does not create disease. Because now this is how we're getting that nourishment through the chain that I showed you a little while ago. But let's go through the weak Agni. Now we create something called ama. That means when you take that same apple and you don't cook it sufficiently, it becomes undigested, uncooked. It's actually partially cooked. So it's partially cooked, but not completely cooked. And it's called ama. Ama actually in Sanskrit means not me. A means no, and ma means me. So the body can't recognize it. Who are you? It tries to move along the system, and it keeps getting rejected. And then over time, because it can't go this way or that way, it's pushed around by everybody, it just flows through the tissues and it starts creating blocked channels, and it weakens Agni. Because as you can see here in the chart, it has the opposite qualities of Agni. So it'll start to weaken Agni further. It'll start to settle and in the weak areas, perhaps in your joints, or as cholesterol. It can manifest in many ways. And so therefore a strong Agni is vital for health. So how would you know whether you have a healthy digestion or whether you have ama? Well, it's a very subtle thing, but here are some tips. If you feel hungry for all 3 meals, you feel adequately thirsty, you have clear burps between meals, this is something highly stressed in Ayurveda. Because when you drink some warm water and you get a clear burp, then that means that things have been digested. But if you get a sour taste, or you get some of the taste of whatever you've eaten still there, that means it's not yet digested. You feel enthusiastic and energetic. Your stools and urine are evacuated in a timely and regular manner. So this is one of the jokes in the community, the Ayurvedic community, is that doesn't matter what you go to see an Ayurvedic practitioner for, they're going to ask you if you pooped. You feel a lightness of body, and you feel alert and exhibit good focus and concentration. On the right side, take a look. You wake up tired even after a good night's sleep. You feel heavy and lethargic and lack energy. Your tongue is coated with a white sticky mucus when you wake up in the morning. You don't feel real hunger and taste. You have generalized aches and pains and stiffness, lack mental clarity or concentration. You feel heaviness in the abdomen or the whole body. You experience frequent indigestion, gas, bloating, and stomach aches, and experience stagnation in the body like constipation, sinus congestion, or difficulty breathing. A lot of these things, we go to the doctor and they say, look, we can't find anything wrong with you, just go home. But actually, there is something. This is all a sign that, if we don't take care of this now, then we're headed to some unhealthy conditions further down the road. So let's take a look now at how this concept of Ayurvedic nutrition differs from conventional nutrition. Rather than thinking about why we eat as a matter of personal preference, likes and dislikes, or I want to look like the person I knew, in that magazine, or, saw in that magazine, or my emotions are directing how I eat. Instead, we can think that we're taking in food because we are taking in prana. We're taking in life force. Instead of thinking about how many calories we want to eat, which of the 5 elements do I need more of right now? Do I have too much air, and do I need to ground that with more water and earth? How do I manage that? Is the importance given to caloric value, or is it to my individual constitution? Who am I, and what's going to balance me? Are the recommendations based on food groups, or are they based on the 6 tastes? And now this is an important point. If I can't digest something, do I just keep eliminating it? This is something I see a lot of. On the other hand, can I just correct my digestive issues? Maybe all those are warning signs that my digestion isn't working well. So is it that you are what you eat, or you are what you digest? And so in Ayurveda, we would say you are what you digest. Ahara, meaning input, consists of food, water, breath, and perception. That's a really interesting idea, that it also includes perception. Agni transforms that into ideas, mental clarity, sharp senses, improved Agni, because Agni itself is nourished by what we eat. We get energy, we have energy reserves, we get radiance, immunity. It creates waste, and it creates the toxins that we talked about earlier. So see how much is in our hands. Okay, let me just take a quick check-in and see if anyone has any questions, or if there are any comments anybody wants to share before I move on. Okay, so let me. Yes, okay, so I see a question here about emotional hunger, and that's a great question. I'm just thinking about that. That's a very good question about emotional hunger, because very often we eat because we're experiencing something that is like a lack within ourselves. And that's going to add to an imbalance of the doshas. I'm going to hold on to this question and see if it starts to get answered as we go forward, and then make sure to address it again. Thank you for bringing that up. So let's continue with the dosha time cycles. So the doshas also fluctuate during the day, during the night, during the seasons, and during the cycles of our life. So the first part of the day is from 6 to 10 a.m. is considered the kapha time. So now that you understand that kapha is sort of a stuckness in the atmosphere, you can see that we would want to be energetic and moving during this time. So you want to wake up by 6 in the morning, ideally. You want to stimulate your digestion with exercise, self-massage, shower, and a light breakfast. You don't want to create too much heaviness or stuckness at this time. It can be harder to get going. Okay, I just was told that there's one more question, and I will definitely get back to that. So now, as we can move forward later in the day between 10 and 2, this is the pitta time. So think about Pitta, that sun energy. We've got some good sun energy. So it's the best time to finish some pending tasks or to do something mentally productive, intellectually challenging. For example, right now we're in the Pitta time. And an interesting concept to have your heaviest meal at lunch, because if you track the movement of the sun in the sky, it's highest at noon. And our digestion, remember the fire element outside and the fire element inside, they work together. Now there are some, I'll explain as we go forward, there are times when that logic doesn't work exactly right, but there's a reason for that. But in a daily cycle, our inner sun tracks with the outer sun. So just the way we would find the time of day warmest and most productive, we also want, our digestion is also most productive at that point. So having our heaviest meal at lunch is advised. And by the end of the day, we want to start winding down. We can plan for the next day. We want to start letting go of the day. It's a good time to take a walk before dinner, do some gentle restorative yoga. It's a good time to eat some sweet fruit or have some warm milk or herbal tea. That time is often when people experience an energy drop. That energy drop can come from not having eaten enough of, at lunch, so your body has run out of fuel. And it's a time when you can have something that's grounding, like sweet fruit. That's often when I have a fruit snack, is in the afternoon, around 3 or 4. So you don't want to do anything too stimulating at this point. So then we get into the evening. The next phase is 6 to 10 p.m. We want to wind down, have a light dinner by 7 o'clock, followed by a gentle walk is ideal, because you never want to just eat and then sit immediately. It's good to have a little bit of movement, not intense movement, just gentle movement. And it's a good idea to turn off your electronics an hour before bed, to start disconnecting so that you can wind down. Sleep is very important. When you have a heavy dinner in the kapha time, followed by sleep, that contributes to ama and creates sluggishness. So sleeping by 10 p.m. allows the body to metabolize at a subtler level. This is really important because when I was showing you earlier those dhatus, those tissues, a lot of their metabolism happens during this period. So when we stay up past 10 p.m., we're more likely to get hungry because we're in pitta time, and therefore we're going to snack, which is not what the body wants. And it also aggravates vata dosha because it starts to create too much dryness. And then there's the early morning before sunrise. So in the spiritual text, this is the end of this period is called Brahma Muhurta. It's an ideal time to be getting up. So notice I said the end of this time. I don't mean 2 in the morning. Closer to 6 in the morning is a good time to get up. It's a good time to do some spiritual practices, pranayama, yoga, and meditation. This was when I told you earlier the story of how I had to jumpstart myself after my mother passed away. This was a key component, because before, when I had some reason to get up early, that was one thing. But now I didn't have a reason to get up early, but I wanted to get up early to just get my day going. This helped a lot. Now look at it seasonally. You'll notice that this late winter to spring is usually the time people get allergies. And it makes more sense now if you think about the fact that winter is a time when things are frozen. And now as the sun increases, as it moves into spring and towards summer, it's going to start melting the ice. So at this point in time, we want to eat lighter food and exercise. The bitter taste is very good at this point. And as we go forward, I'll explain more about how you consume the bitter taste. So doing baked, broiled, grilled, warm foods, legumes, vegetables, hot spices, the hotter spices at this point, and increasing activity, making sure you're not too sluggish. Just think about kapha and that stuck energy and how you undo that. Going towards the summer, we get into pitta season. And At this point, we want to have more cooling, moistening, tempering, and calming foods and lifestyle because there's the outside intense heat. Agni is lower. This is one of the points I was mentioning earlier that can be a little counterintuitive. But if you think about the fact that the body is radiating heat outwards, then there's less heat inside, and so our Agni is actually lower. So we want to have light and easily digestible foods. And we want to avoid heat and overexertion. And in the fall and early winter, we are in the Vata season. This is not a time to have cold items. We want to have warm soups, stews, and steamed vegetables. And you want to balance the dry, light, and cold qualities. This is the time when our Agni gets stronger. Again, a little counterintuitive. But think about the fact that your sweat glands close and the heat stays in. Just like now, the heater in the house is turning on more often because the outside is cold. So because the heat stays in, our Agni gets stronger. And therefore, we can eat heavier foods. I recently heard a talk by John Douillard who explained that even from the Western point of view, this is when the amylases are more likely to be present in our body, which break down heavy starches. So even from that perspective, which enzymes are active? Those enzymes that can break down heavier foods are more active in this period. So this is a time we want to eat root vegetables and have more grounding. And our Agni actually is stronger to help do that. So it's actually perfect that we often have our traditional times, Thanksgiving, Christmas, and in all the cultures, there's always that harvest festival and some winter festivals. And so this is a time when we don't have to feel too guilty. But as we come back towards the Kapha season, the late winter and early spring, I was thinking the other day that it's perfect that this is when we make New Year's resolutions. And it's a good time to start our New Year's resolutions because we want to now start pulling that off, getting rid of that extra kapha before it starts coming out as allergies. So fall and spring are transition times when heat is increasing or heat is decreasing. And so those are ideal times for a mild cleanse. And I'll discuss more about that as we go forward. But these transition times are built in as times when if you do a cleanse, you're helping the body get rid of the accumulated toxins and purifying the body over the year so that you don't keep accumulating. And now we get to the life cycle. So babies and children up to 20 are in the kapha phase. And again, that makes sense if you think about the fact that it's a growing phase. So, and the ailments you often see are mucus and congestion. It's a time for building strength. And in the Vedas, we would call that the brahmacharya phase. It's again a time of growing. And then we go into our pitta phase. The pitta phase where we're building our skills. We're transforming the world. We experience more stress because we try to achieve. It's all the pitta qualities. And that correlates to the grahastha phase. Now, in our later years, this is when we can really go deeply within because we've accumulated all this experience from our pitta phase. And so this is a time, and I find this time is not well viewed, in current society, because we think of that as just sort of a waste of time, or how do you get through, you watch TV, or you do things that are sort of wasting time. But it's actually a gift. This time is a gift where you can go deeper within, because now the person who was struggling in those earlier years has acquired a lot of experience. And you can use that to many advantages, and needn't all be a spiritual practice. It could be even learning new languages or finding ways to take your experience and make it of use. So it's actually a very, very beautiful period, and that correlates to what we call the Vanaprastha and Sannyas phases in the Vedas. But it's really important that we understand that that's a phase where we are naturally, our digestion is going to slow down. We are going to experience more dryness, but that's not a problem. There are many Ayurvedic disciplines that enable us to age gracefully and to allow the body to naturally come to its end, but to allow us to transcend that. So again, bringing back the idea of yoga and Ayurveda as sister sciences. And so let me now stop and see about the questions. Okay, so I see the question here. A specific disease can be cured by Ayurveda. That depends. As my teachers would always say, that depends. It depends on the stage of the disease. It depends on the stage of the person who has the disease, or not stage really, strength. We always say rogi bala and roga bala. So rogi bala would be the person who has the disease, their strength. The strength of the disease itself, there's many combinations. Diseases in Ayurveda are classified into easily curable, curable with difficulty, or manageable. So it's not a guarantee. Very often, what Ayurveda can provide is help managing. Just as an example, if you had, let's say, a very debilitating cancer, okay, I am back. Audio is back. Okay. Sorry about that. Well, while I'm not sharing the slides, let me just go ahead and answer the question, and then we'll try sharing the slides again. So I was answering this question. I was answering this question about curing disease. And so I was saying that diseases are classified into curable, so easily curable, curable with difficulty, and manageable and incurable. There are 4 classifications of diseases. And so it depends on the strength of the patient plus the strength of the disease. I was talking about cancer. Okay, my husband is listening. He's awake. How good. So I was giving the example that suppose you had a very debilitating cancer. I don't want to say either way. My teachers would always say it depends. So it's worth looking at Ayurveda. It's worth talking to a Vaidya. It's worth checking if you can get what help you can get. You'll never be offered, no, we can't do anything. That would be very unlikely, because at least the symptoms can be managed, or there's some help. There's also the concept in Ayurveda, because Ayurveda is part of the Vedas, that when your time comes, your time comes. It's not going to try to fight what is destined, but it's going to do its best to help. So I hope that answers that question. And okay, looks like that was the only question for now. And I haven't forgotten Sharda's question about emotional hunger. So we'll still talk about that. Okay, I'm going to try to share the slides. Wish me luck. Yes, I did that. How problems arise? I'm just checking that that slide is showing. Yes. Okay, very good. Okay, let's take a look at the doshas from the quality point of view. So kapha dosha, just imagine you combine water and earth. Then you're going to have something that's heavy, slow, dull, sticky, stable, and cold. Now you bring a little pitta along, which has got hot and sharp qualities. It's going to increase that dryness. And what is it going to do? You're going to start having flowing, liquid, moist, and lighter qualities. Just like you took a block of ice and you applied heat to it. Now you continue drying that and drying that, what are you going to get? You're going to start getting all these qualities of vata dosha. And as those qualities cool and condenses and increases the moisture, you'll come back to kapha dosha. So this is a cycle. I thought of this the other day when I was making rice. You know, if you're cooking rice, you put the elements together in the pot with some water, and you've got the earth and the water separated, and then you start heating it over the fire, and so the water starts coming out of the rice and sticking, and it becomes sticky. And, you know, and then if I were to continue, if I forgot about that, which I have done in the past, if I forgot about that and let it burn, then all the water would be used up, and you'd start getting too much, you know, air, and of course the charred stuff at the bottom, it would separate, everything would separate. But if instead I catch it at the right time and I just close the lid and turn off the fire, then it'll, you know, the moisture will increase, and it'll start to become a good solid thing. So this is what I meant earlier when I said once you start learning these principles, you can start seeing them everywhere in the universe, and sometimes things take a while, but then they start to click. Now, what do we do about this? Well, there's a principle that we balance by using the opposite quality. So if I have too much of that heavy, slow, dull, sticky quality, then I need more lightness. If I've got too much cold, I need warmth. If I have too much sharpness, I need calming. Too much mobile, I need some stability. Too much rough, I need smooth. So we use the opposite qualities, and this is how the Ayurvedic practitioner will check if, you know, which herbs they want to give you by which qualities would counteract what you have, the issue you have. And what could happen if we have too much of these doshas? And what can we do to make these doshas more aggravated? So here's an example with vata dosha. If we eat too much bitter, pungent, astringent, cold, dry, light food, or exposed to that, exposed to cold and wind, if we eat too little or at irregular meal times, if we suppress urges, there's a list of 13 urges given in the root texts, but I just listed a few here. All the urges are controlled by vata dosha. So when we suppress those urges, we don't eat when we're hungry, we don't drink when we're thirsty, we suppress sneezing. There are many other urges that are listed. We stay up late, or we don't get enough sleep. We're experiencing uncertainty, insecurity, fear, and grief. Excessive sexual activity, exercise, or travel, loud sounds, fall, and the end of the day or the night. These all aggravate vata dosha. Pitta dosha is aggravated by too much pungent, sour, salty, hot, intense, sharp, and light food and lifestyle. So these are not just food, by the way. I could be doing too intense a yoga practice, you know, and hot yoga, or walking too much cardio. That can aggravate pitta dosha. Too much coffee or alcohol, because they have the sharpness. Exposure to heat and sun. Eating too late, where I'm missing where the agni is just right. Lack of sleep, stress, anger, lack of water intake, and summer, midday, and midnight. And kapha dosha, too much sweet, sour, salty, cold, damp, heavy. Too much yogurt, fish, urad dal. Urad dal is the black lentil, or fried food. Exposure to cold and damp. Excessive sleep and day sleep. Depression. Substances that create secretion, that's secretory substances. Excessive water intake. Lack of exercise, sedentary lifestyle, and spring and morning and evening. That kapha dosha, this list of kapha dosha also is what increases ama in our system. And we could have any prakriti, it doesn't matter, but these doshas can be aggravated. So it doesn't matter what our body constitution is, we could be aggravating these doshas by doing any of these things. And this is just a partial list, as you can imagine. These are the top ones we look for. So again, if you go for a consultation, it'll be typical to be asked, well, what is your typical daily routine? And when do you eat? And when do you sleep? And again, you came for hip pain and you're wondering why you're getting asked all these questions. Now let's talk a little bit about stress and what we mean by stress in Ayurveda. So when we are exposed to constant stress, that activates our sympathetic nervous system, which is known as the fight or flight. Whereas rest activates the parasympathetic nervous system, called rest or digest. So when the body feels it's under attack, it accumulates resources that are easier to convert into energy, which are fat, sugar, and cholesterol. These are what can be converted quickly into energy. So if we're constantly noticing that we have these in our system, it may be that we're undergoing too much stress. In addition, when we're in this mode, the digestive power is lowered. Our Agni is dampened because the body needs to be ready for fight or flight. And therefore, this takes a huge toll on immunity. So we want to remember that we need to reduce stress. Practices such as gentle yoga, pranayama, meditation, and anything we need to do to actively release inner stress and anger. And it's really important to know that stress isn't just, oh, I went through a bereavement in my family, or I'm just going through too much work. My boss gave me a big project. It's called Ati Yoga. It's anything where we push our body or mind past its threshold. And examples could be reading the newspaper every day, could be not optimal for your health because you're exposing your mind constantly to, for example, now during the pandemic, we're exposing our mind constantly to negative topics, negative thoughts. That's pushing it past its threshold. So we can redefine stress as what's aggravating in any way. And it makes us more mindful about that. So this might be an example of how you get a consultation. I'll just check at this point if there are any questions. Yes, I was prompted that this was drawn by my 14-year-old niece, who's an amazing artist. Okay, so I'm going to move forward to the Ayurvedic perspective of immunity. I'm just going to touch on this briefly. The main factor in immunity is called bala, or strength, and according to Ayurveda, there are 3 types. Sahaja, which is based on our inherited congenital or based on our body constitution. Kalaja, which is according to the time of life, the season, stage of disease, or many other time factors. And Yuktikrit, which is a wholesome diet or lifestyle. So just see that first 2 are really out of our hands. But the third one is something we do have a say in. And so this relates to the idea of epigenetics, which is that it doesn't matter what genes or, are the operating system, to use that term again, that we came in with. Are we fueling it? Or are we, what are we choosing? How are we choosing to align? So just an emphasis again that our diet and lifestyle contribute to our immunity, if we think about it this way. And so just to go back to that question about whether any disease can be cured by Ayurveda, this is part of what is required. It may be that we have a strength or a weakness in the first, Sahaja stage. Kalaja, are we at a very advanced stage, or what can we do with that? Or the time of our life, are we in a weaker stage of our life? And what are we doing about our diet and lifestyle? It's very important that we also know how we contribute to it. So even if you do have a disease, no matter how advanced, are you doing your best, along with the Ayurvedic herbs and formulations, are you doing your best to not fuel that? And so this is how the processes of healing, which is to, again, remember to clear the channels. So the first step is lightening, or lankana, that idea that we want to clear and open. We want to clear out the toxins. We want to kindle the fire. We want to clear out the channels. And then we want to start balancing the doshas. And so that's partially going to be lightening if it's more kapha dosha. We may need to ground more if it's more vata dosha. And then that finally, we want to rejuvenate the weak systems and enhance the ojas. And so ama being the toxins, we want to reduce them, and and ojas being the immunity, we want to enhance that. So that's sort of the chart for any illness, whether it's a mild or very severe. This would be the plan, the protocol. This also includes, you've probably heard the term panchakarma. This includes that, where there are more, there's some regimens that you would do under the guidance and close guidance of an Ayurvedic doctor. But I also wanted to highlight here that, therefore, it's not just about, oh, I need to exercise more, I need to eat less. This is a common slogan now in society. But really, that lightening can create too much vata dosha. So it's not just about lessen, do less, have less in your body, clear out colonics, all those things. All that clearing out also causes problems. If you're not nourishing, you're not stabilizing, you're not grounding, then you have a lot of problems. So it's really important to do it in a very systematic manner, where you first clear out the issues, and then make sure that you nourish and sustain and strengthen. Okay, so we're getting to diet and lifestyle. So there are 4 goals in, according to the Vedas, where we align with the material. We spend the first part of our life getting the material comfort. We also are using those resources for pleasure. Then at some point, we realize we want to live more in accordance with truth. And finally, we want to go for self-realization. And so the diet gives us the nourishment we need. The sleep restores us. And then we are able to have true actions, brahmacharya. So wholesome food depends on 3 main factors: when it's eaten, how much is eaten, and what is eaten. When we've talked about earlier, we've looked at the time cycles, but my teacher would always say, of these 3, when is the most important? Because everything works on cycles. Just as we've seen, nature works on cycles. The sun comes out at certain times, and then there's the flow of the sun and the moon, and everything in nature, there's the seasons. Similarly, within our body, there's respiration, there's digestion, there's the beats of the heart, our pulse rate. Everything works in cycles. So when we eat is very, very important. It's very important that if you're having 3 meals a day, to have something at each of these meals. Now you can vary that. If your Agni is less, have less, but don't vary it. Keep it within, you would say 48-minute window, but roughly an hour, 45 minutes to an hour window. Every day, the same time, eat at those times. Otherwise, your Agni doesn't know. It's like your Agni is ready for food, but one day it's not coming at that time. The next day it comes at that time. It gets erratic. It doesn't know what to do. How much is eaten and what is eaten? So now we'll look a bit more at the next 2. So how much? So the Ayurveda guidance is to make lunch your main meal and have a lighter breakfast and dinner. Breakfast and dinner both fall close to that, or in that kapha kal, that kapha time. Dinner might be more in the end of the vata time, kapha time, but it's very important that if you have a heavy dinner and then go to bed, you're just going to be creating problems. And then you can vary, having heavier foods in smaller quantities and light foods more. And if you put these first two together, move your heavier item, it might be fish or meat or something that you're having that's heavier, move that to your lunch rather than your dinner. That would be a better time to have it. Eat only if you're hungry. Snack if Agni permits it. So if you find that mid-morning, around 11 or 10:30, you need a snack to get through to lunch, that's a good time to have something. And maybe here, we're touching on the Shaga's question about emotional hunger. That very often is when we see people come in for consultations, and when they tell us that they just graze or they have trouble emotionally, that they need to eat. That's where this becomes challenging, because then the Agni is getting hampered, and so it's very important at that point to address that. And so I think this is probably how I can think about that question. If I were doing a consultation and notice that this is how this person is, why they're eating, I would ask you, why are you eating through the day, if that's what you're doing? And I would suspect that there would be emotional, mental components. So we'd talk about that. And if that's true, then some of the formulations would be helping the mind as well, more specifically, perhaps Brahmi or something that's also, or Guruji, that's good for, good to help, stabilize the Agni, but also has a mental component. It's also helpful for stabilizing the mind. So it's very important to become mindful of why you're doing that. And if you're not able to stop, at least work with it. Can you reduce a bit? Can you only do it at certain times? Can you, mindfulness is very important, self-awareness, not becoming mechanical. Pacing your eating, not eating too slow, not eating too fast. Again, mindfulness. We're just talking about mindfulness again and again. Don't skip meals. I think I addressed that earlier. I'll just say it again. Fasting, we often get questions about fasting, but it aggravates Agni, because Agni actually gets nourished by what we eat by the 6 days. So have less if you need to have less. Have less if you need to have less, but don't skip your meal. Space meals at least 4 hours apart. And the quote on the top is what I'm referring to. Half of the stomach is to be filled with food, 1/4 with water, and the rest to be left empty for the doshas, for the air, basically, for movement. That vata dosha can then move. So the question then comes, what is the half stomach? So when your hunger is appeased, when you're no longer hungry, you've reached that half stomach. You don't want to keep eating. You don't want to just finish your plate. That's a common misconception. One of my teachers would say, your stomach is not a waste bin. So you have to retrain yourself. If you're not hungry, then just put it in the compost pail, or, it's not a good idea to just eat it because it's there on your plate. Another very important point is warm, unctuous food. Heat expands and cold constricts. So when we consume cold items, we make the body work harder. To normalize the body temperature, the body has to then recover from all that coldness. It weakens Agni, as you can imagine from the earlier discussion. Putting cold water on a fire isn't helpful. It constricts the channels. It solidifies fat. This is an important point, because our bodies are moving, they're basically moving objects. Any moving object needs lubrication. So we need fat. Fat is not the bad guy. But what happens is coldness solidifies it. So then it starts to create problems. And therefore, we create a more hospitable environment for ama and for unfriendly microorganisms like viruses. So Ayurveda would not advise raw food. It's harder on digestion. Your body has to do 100% of the cooking. Whereas when you cook the food, then there's 20 or 30% left of the cooking that the body can do, that the digestive fire can do. So the cooked food actually stimulates digestion. So in Ayurveda, we would actually recommend avoiding salads or minimizing them if you're very attached to them. Have a little bit with a meal, but don't make it your whole meal. But fruit is naturally ripened by the sun, so it doesn't need to be cooked, but we would advise not eating it cold. Another common practice here is drinking cold water, and especially with ice. That's never recommended in Ayurveda. It's difficult to digest, whereas boiled water is light and easy to digest. So your best practice is to boil water and then either drink it as warm as you can, or you can allow it to cool to room temperature. And with your meal, sip warm water. That'll help the Agni and help it to digest. And this last part, it's just a reminder that, we use hot water within a hose or a pipe to clean it out. So we want warm stews, warm soups, digested teas. That'll help keep the body clean and flowing. Freshly cooked food is very important. Once the food is cooked, the process of deterioration has begun because that process of transformation has started. So the prana starts to deteriorate. It's ideally consumed as soon as possible. So when you put it overnight in the refrigerator and keep it as a leftover, then the tamas increases and there's more heaviness. So ideally, and this is what you'd see, in some of the countries like India and many other cultures where, this practice is there, you would cook food, say, in the morning and eat it that day. But, we need to be practical. So if you do need to keep leftovers, then try to keep them in separate containers where you only open it once. And if you can use it within a day is the best. Chemicals and preservatives actually create a crisis for the system. We can see that now if the 5 elements are in nature and the 5 elements are in our body, then when we put chemicals in, the body just can't understand it. And so it can create hypersensitivity, autoimmune disorders, allergies, and ama is more likely to happen. Microwave use depletes prana. But now, we can say, gosh, how do I manage? So one advice I've heard that I think, is very helpful is to say at least once a day, make it a point to enjoy a freshly cooked meal, and then work with what you have to do that's practical for your life. And remember that anything you apply to your skin is eating it just the way, the inside skin in the stomach is eating. So be careful about the chemicals in your detergent, your oral care, and your skincare, because they're also being eaten by your body. Spices are very important. These are some spices. I've listed them in the handout, so I won't go through each one just to make sure that we have enough time. And I don't want to leave out the other spices and other herbs like rosemary and lavender and sage and oregano. These are all wonderful spices and they all have healing qualities as well. So it's very important to use these and remember that they're all healing. Also to remember that they're potent and you only need a little amount. When you use too much, then the body doesn't recognize it and it throws it out, or it can cause problems. So people, for example, have discovered, oh, turmeric is wonderful, and they'll have too much turmeric. You only need a pinch. You only need like a quarter teaspoon when you're cooking. There's so many practical uses for each of these herbs, and that's what I've been listing here just to give you a sense that they all have their place. And finally, I want to just make the emphasis of, don't always use very pungent spices. It's okay once in a while, but chili peppers, cayenne, even garam masala, you have to be mindful of when you use them, which season you're using them, and why you're using them. Are you using them to break down and digest a very heavy item? Or are you just using it because you think it tastes good? Just be mindful of that. I've also listed rock salt here, or Himalayan pink salt, is pacifying for all 3 doshas versus other salts which are too heating and actually harm the eyes. So there are some simple adjustments, that you can make that are very helpful. And so now let's talk about some food choices. Again, I've given you this on your handout, so I won't go through each one. Squashes are great in the summer, summer squashes, and in the winter, of course, you get winter squashes. They're fabulous, wonderfully healing. Root vegetables, excellent in the wintertime, like now. Bitter greens and vegetables are very important, but they can aggravate vata because of the bitterness. So if you cook them with the cumin, ajwain, and hing, which is asafoetida, in some ghee, that is very, it pacifies that cold dryness of the bitters. And I'll wait to see if you have any questions when we get to that point on these. And so at this point, you might feel like this. This is a direct quote by my husband, by the way. Again, drawn by my niece. Milk has wonderfully grounding qualities. And from milk, you can make yogurt. But yogurt, although it's highly prized in our current times, it's actually sour and heating. And it can cause a lot of aggravation and clogging. But instead, from yogurt, you can make something called buttermilk by just combining it in a 1-to-4 ratio with water and having it with your meal. And from yogurt, you can make cultured butter, and from that, cultured ghee. And cultured ghee is very healthy for the mind. It's the healthiest form of fat. It crosses the blood-brain barrier. It's the kind of fat that's most like the brain fat. And it is the only oily substance that actually kindles Agni. It's definitely highly prized. Now, cultured ghee, very often you don't find in the Indian store, you'll just find regular ghee. But cultured ghee, you can either make directly from cultured butter or you can purchase it. And there are places you can purchase it online. So a good recommendation to incorporate cultured ghee and buttermilk into your diet. And milk, certainly, if that's right for your dosha. For kapha dosha people, often they're not fond of milk. But many people who believe they're lactose intolerant, it's just because they're consuming milk not in the right way. More tips, you wouldn't, you know, it's interesting that the root texts talk about shower and exercise as kindling Agni. So actually, these need to be done mindfully, best in the morning. And exercise, you need to, you know, anyone can take a brisk walk in nature. Whether you do more depends on which doshas you are working on and maybe the season. So it's important to be mindful of that. Just to keep track of time, I'm now at a point where I can check on questions. Yes, okay, I see a question here about chronic constipation since childhood and a great attraction to candies. Yes, there are definitely remedies. You know, it's important that you know, you definitely have a consultation, and you know, I do consultations as well. But it's important to find out what doshas are, you know, off balance. It could be a vata dosha imbalance, but just offhand, without knowing more, I can say that there are remedies. You know, Triphala, which is well known, and anyways, I think, you know, it's best to say once you get a consultation, it'll be easier to actually discuss that more. So, you know, consider that. Here's one thing that would really help, even with constipation. This is something CCFT is going to help in many ways with indigestion, with clearing out ama. And it's very simple. Just boil 6 cups of water with cumin, coriander, and fennel, and you can even add some dried ginger. And boil 6 cups in the morning, leave it on the stovetop or store it in a thermos and enjoy it through the day. Just sip. 6 to 8 cups of water, warm boiled water every day is excellent. It really gets everything flowing. Some of these things, some of these practices that we're discussing here can really help with all sorts of these issues, indigestion, constipation, things like that. And you could include just some of these spices, cumin, ginger alone. You can play with them. Coriander, as I listed earlier, is excellent for cooling, so it's very good for balancing pitta, and it can be used for excess heat. And here are just some ideas for, when we talk about meals, how do we go forward? So suppose you had, you really love oatmeal, you want a nice warm breakfast because we've talked about warm, not cold. So you make some oatmeal and you put these spices in. Well, in the springtime, I would omit fruit, and I love grated coconut in mine, so I just put it there as well. But I would omit that in the springtime because I don't want too much of the sweet taste. In the summer and the fall, I want more grounding and I want sweetness and lubrication. So I'm going to have the raisins and the sweet fruit. And in the wintertime, I can even have more ghee because my Agni is stronger. I can add walnuts and almonds, and I can even use milk. And if so, I would take out the fruit and the salt because fruit and salt and milk do not go together. We have a concept of incompatible combinations in Ayurveda. Another one of my favorites, my husband and I do this at least once a week, is the mung flour crepes. Mung flour, you can buy at an Indian store, or you can buy it online. Mung bean, the mung dal, that's the flour that comes from that. So it's lentil, it's a protein. And you can use mung flour even as a skin cleanser. It's wonderful. Mung is 3 dosha balancing. So just take some mung flour, add some rock salt, turmeric, roasted cumin powder, and some hing. And you could add even sauteed onions, except in springtime. And just make them as crepes. We have a skillet and we just make crepes out of them. For lunch or dinner, at the top here, I just put some of the spices I use when I do my sauteing. You don't have to use all of these, but these are, a good bunch that are not too heating either. They're pungent, but they're pretty balancing. Cumin, fennel, ginger, cardamom, turmeric, cinnamon, curry leaves, rock salt. You can add fenugreek. And depending on the season, you can even add, say, mustard seeds or something more pungent. You could make khichdi or sauteed vegetables using seasonal vegetables. You could add sauteed onions and grated coconut. And in the spring, omit those and have more pungent spices, like I mentioned, the mustard seeds or something a little bit more warming. Again, without becoming too warming. Be careful, because when in the spring you use those too pungent spices, you just have to see. As you get more into summer, that's going to start overheating. So you're going to have to experiment with what's right for you. And soups or stews, such as mung soup, this is ideal especially for dinner, but anytime. Urad dal, which is the black lentil, is heavier, so you can use that in the fall and early winter because it requires more digestion, more agni. Whereas mung dal and also masoor dal, they're lighter dals. They can be used in all seasons. Abhyanga, I had mentioned it on an earlier slide. This is where you do an oil massage, self-oil massage before shower. And so if you think about, this helps clear the channels because you are applying oil and then stepping into a hot shower. So that lubrication and heat opens the channels and clears it out. Very, very simple practice, has so many benefits. And you can use sesame or, or coconut oil. These would be the cold pressed raw. Or Kerala Ayurveda sells medicated oils, so you could use any of those depending on your doshas. And at night, applying oil on the soles of your feet and then wearing socks, going to sleep. You can also apply a little bit on the crown of the head and on the ears. This all balances Vata dosha. And there are practices of oil pulling and nasya. Nasya being the nasal administration. You put 1 or 2 drops of sesame oil into each nostril. All these, by the way, there's another advantage is they help immunity. They help protect against bacteria, viruses. This is something we can do. We're so mindful right now about viruses and bacteria. These are something, all these practices help with immunity in many ways. Spring and fall cleanse, I've mentioned it earlier. The Kerala Ayurveda Wellness Center actually conducts guided cleanses twice a year, which you can do from home. So you would meet with a doctor online, have a consultation, and then they would give you the specific protocol you would do with which formulations. And then as a group, they would, communicate with everyone, but you would have been given your personal formulations that you would do. So these are good times to do that, these transition times. And this way you would help cleanse the body over the year. And I just wanted to touch this. This is a huge topic, and I just wanted to touch on it. Formulations, in the Kerala Ayurveda practice, formulations are widely used. Dashamula, Panchakola, Gudachi, Haritaki, there's so many. But there is one, this Ojas capsule that Kerala Ayurveda sells, that you can take 1 capsule after breakfast and 1 capsule after dinner that helps with, immunity, with digestion, with metabolism, with ama. So I just wanted to throw this in just to address this topic of formulations, that herbs are also very helpful. Okay, we reached the end in time. So at this point, I'm going to stop sharing and see if there are any more questions and if there's anything that didn't get addressed. Before I do that, I just want to share some resources with you that are also on your handout. I am doing consultations now as part of my studies. So we're asked to, make presentations like this, and also to start doing some consultations. So you're welcome to contact me if you're interested. I will be doing another webinar sometime early next year. So I will be definitely letting all of you know. And at this point, let me stop sharing, since all of this is on your handout as well. And let me just see if there are any questions. I'm glad we made it on time. Yes, I see her question. Can you tell us more about the foods not to combine? Okay, I'll address that. Fruit is not advised to combine with milk, because sweet fruits and milk become too heavy for the system, and sour fruits and milk are, sour is heating. So when you take something that has opposite qualities, like cold milk, cold heavy milk, and sour heating fruit, that creates something in the system that's incompatible. So that's one example. Yogurt should not be combined with fruit, which is very popular here. People combine fruit and yogurt all the time. It should not be combined with fruit, because yogurt already has the quality that clogs the channels. And when you combine it with fruit, that creates more heaviness. So some of the principles are about having things that are opposite qualities. For example, if you put leftovers with fresh food, then that makes the stomach have to work. It's more challenging for the stomach to have to do. So anything I'm mentioning, if you do it once or twice or here or there, it's not an issue. We're talking about you're doing it every day. It's part of your practice. You're doing it constantly, because a good Agni, a good digestive fire, can handle these things once or twice. Not a big deal. But when it's constantly having to deal with it, it starts to lead to disease, and it's very slow. It's a chronic process that starts to build up. Another example is combining milk, say, with savory items, like with salt or as part of a meal. There are people who, do that. They combine it as milk. I'm not talking about cheese. I'm talking about milk itself. Then, people will have skin conditions. It'll cause eczema and things like that, again, because of the incompatible qualities. So those are some examples that I'm thinking of offhand. But it has a lot to do with the combining things that that when they come together, the body struggles. It doesn't know what to do with. Another one is ghee and honey. Should not be had in equal quantities. So honey should not be heated, but that's sort of that's not quite an incompatible. It's just, that's incompatible on its own, but that's not combining. So Vasant Lad has a list of these that he's written about, but I would say probably the ones I've listed are the main ones I can think of offhand. Fruit and grains are fine together. So for example, having fruit with oatmeal is fine. I make, for my breakfast, I often make something which is cream of wheat with milk. That's fine, because they're both sweet. So, okay, just reading. Yes, okay, I was given a tip to mention the handout again. So please remember there's a handout that you can download if you haven't downloaded it yet. Now it should make more sense now that you've seen that. I see one comment. How do I remember all this? That's a good point. It's, to go slowly. That's a big thing I have to say, is go slowly. Make 1 or 2 changes, try them out, see how they feel. This is what I said earlier. It's not a prescriptive science. It's more about, this is how things work. It's taken me a long time to implement some things, and sometimes I just try it out. There's also a concept called satmya, which is very interesting, which is some people in their culture and over centuries have been doing this thing, so their systems have acclimated. But you take another person and have them do the same thing, and it's going to cause problems. So it's a very subtle science. You have to find out what is working for you and what is not. Just trying to see if I missed any questions here. Oh, the handout is, yes, the handout is on the right side top. I just see that someone had mentioned that. I haven't received the handout. The handout, you should see a tab on the right side top. The menu item next to the chat. Thank you, Sharda. That's very helpful. If you look there next to chat, you should see a tab. Yes, please check for the handout in that tab. I hope everyone found the handout by now. Okay, so I don't see any other questions. Let me not forget to mention that in a day or two, I'll be sending out the link to this video. So if you want to watch it again, you're welcome to. And I'll also be sending out a survey. I really appreciate your feedback on how this was for you. And I'll also be contacting you when I plan the next webinar. In the meantime, you're welcome to contact me if you're interested in the consultation. Or if you have any questions, you're also welcome to contact me. So you'll be getting a handout soon. Thank you. Thank you. I can't believe I stuck to time. That's amazing. Thank you. Okay. Bye-bye. Thank you, everyone.